Thank you for standing by. At this time, all participants are on listen-only mode. During the question and answer session, press star followed by the number 1. Today's conference is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I'd now like to introduce Mavi with the Department of Human Resources in Nebraska. You may begin.
Good morning, everyone. This is Mavi Barbade. I am the Program Coordinator in the Nebraska State Unit on Aging. I am pleased to introduce the speakers for today's webinar, Money Smart for Older Adults. Jennifer Duane is a Senior Program Analyst in the Office of Older Americans at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Jennifer joined the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau in December of 2011. She is the manager of the Money Smart for Older Adults program and leads the Offices of Community Networks initiative. Prior to joining the CFPB, Jennifer was the founder and CEO of the nonprofit Elder Financial Protection Network in San Francisco. Under her leadership, the network developed education programs for older adults and family caregivers on preventing, identifying, and responding to elder financial exploitation, and an award-winning professional training for the financial services industry, law enforcement, social services, and other professionals. In 2004, California Attorney General Bill Locklear presented Jennifer with the Attorney General's Award for Outstanding Service in Elder Abuse Prevention. In 2009, she was presented with the FDIC Chairman's Award for Excellence and Innovation in Financial Education. In 2012, the network presented her with the Centennial Award for her contributions in the field. The next speaker will be Naomi Karp. She's the Senior Policy Analyst at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's Office of Older Americans. She focuses on elder financial exploitation and the impact of diminished decision-making capacity on financial security. At the Bureau, Naomi has been the team lead for the CFPB's Managing Someone Else's Money Guides, an interagency guidance on privacy laws and reporting financial abuse of older adults, a guide for long-term care facilities on protecting residents, and the advisory for financial institutions on preventing and responding to elder financial exploitation. From 2005 to 2011, Naomi was a Senior Strategic Policy Advisor at AARP's Public Policy Institute. In that capacity, she conducted research and advocacy on elder financial exploitation, advanced planning for incapacity, healthcare decision-making, powers of attorney, guardianship, and legal rights. She also provided technical assistance for federal and state legislative advocacy and worked with the AARP's National Policy Council. We will also be joined by Kay Gregg, Community Affairs Specialist in FDIC, who is located in the Minneapolis field office. So please welcome our first speaker, Jennifer Duane.
Thank you, Madhvi. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, everyone on the line and everybody here in the room. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you to Kay and Naomi for participating and providing their wisdom to you all. Just quickly before we go forward, I just want to kind of set the stage here. With over 50 million Americans aged 62 and older, older adults are prime targets for financial exploitation by both persons they know and trust and by strangers. Financial exploitation has been called the crime of the 21st century, with one study suggesting that older Americans lost at least $2.9 billion to financial exploitation by a broad spectrum of perpetrators in 2010 was that. Other recent studies have estimated in the neighborhood of $36 billion a year lost to elder financial exploitation. A key factor in some of these cases is mild cognitive impairment, which can diminish an older adult's ability to make sound financial decisions. This is an epidemic, and it's under the radar. The cases tend to be very complex and can be difficult to investigate and prosecute. Elders who lose their life savings usually have little or no opportunity to regain what they have lost. Elder financial abuse or exploitation can result in the loss of the ability to live independently decline in the older person's health, broken trust, and fractured families. Awareness and prevention is the first step. Planning ahead for financial well-being and the possibility of diminished capacity or diminished financial capacity is critical. Reporting and early intervention that results in loss prevention is imperative. Money Smart for Older Adults is designed to provide you with the information and tips to help, or excuse me, it's designed to provide older people and whoever is interested and needs to know with information and tips to help prevent common fraud scams and other types of elder financial exploitation in your community. And with that, we will go forward. So the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, as many of you are aware, was created by the Dodd-Frank Act to ensure that consumer financial markets work by making rules more effective, by consistently and fairly enforcing those rules, and by empowering consumers to take control over their economic lives. This last piece of our agency's mission is defined by our financial education work aimed at consumers of all ages. We educate consumers because we believe an informed consumer is the first line of defense against abusive practices. We enforce consumer protection laws. We supervise banks, credit unions, and other financial companies, and we enforce federal consumer financial laws. We also study the marketplace. We gather and analyze available information to better understand consumers, financial service providers, and the consumer financial market. In the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, we have a consumer education and engagement division, and within that we have several special population offices. The Dodd-Frank Act created an office for older Americans within the agency, and the agency this office is dedicated to the financial security of older consumers, which are defined under our laws as those who are age 62 and older, and to the protection of older consumers from unfair, abusive, and deceptive practices, which we call UDAP, unfair, deceptive, and abusive practices. One of our key areas of work consists of helping older consumers prevent unfair, deceptive, and abusive practices that are aimed specifically at them. And we do target industry as our primary, as a regulator, as our primary focus. However, we recognize in the Office for Older Americans that many older adults are targeted by family members or people they know, and our mandate under Dodd-Frank is rather broad, so we have put a great deal of focus into elder financial exploitation that affects older consumers that is perpetrated by all types of perpetrators. Today's presentation will describe one of our key initiatives to fight elder financial exploitation. We also seek to promote the creation of new networks and enhance existing networks' capacity to address elder financial exploitation, and Money Smart is a great tool for those networks, which can be financial abuse specialist teams, multidisciplinary teams, elder abuse coalitions, task forces, et cetera, which you can find through your local area agency on aging. And, or it will stand alone. If there's not a network to put out Money Smart for Older Adults, you can take it out there on your own. It is built to be plug and play. So with that, I will turn this over to Kay Gregg from the FDIC, who will introduce herself and the Money Smart for Older Adults program. Kay, are you with us?
I am. If you would move the slide, please.
Sure. There we go.
Thank you. Hi, good morning. My name is Kay Gregg. I am with the FDIC, and I am representing the Community Affairs branch of FDIC. We do financial education and technical assistance to both financial institutions and the general public. The FDIC serves to promote public confidence in the U.S. financial system. We do that by ensuring deposits in banks and thrift institutions for at least $250,000. Also by identifying, monitoring, and addressing risk to the deposit insurance funds, and by limiting the effect on the economy and financial system when a bank or a thrift fails. We are an independent agency of the government. We were created in 1933, and I always have to say, not one depositor has lost a single cent of insured funds as a result of any failure. As an independent agency, we receive no congressional appropriation. We are funded by the premiums that the banks and thrift institutions pay for deposit insurance coverage. Let me see. We also provide economic inclusion and access to mainstream banking systems as one of our priorities in our training. Next slide, please. So the objectives today we are going to address the Money Smart for Older Adults. We will be overviewing the module, the program planning, the potential community partners, and then, of course, we're going to have a lot of speaker tips. Hopefully, a lot of you have already heard of Money Smart, and I'm also hoping that some of you have actually done financial training on Money Smart. Next slide. So, Money Smart for Older Adults. It was developed jointly by FDIC and CFPB as an instructor-led training. The Money Smart program was actually kicked off in 2001 with the Money Smart for Adults, and then quickly building on that initial curriculum, we added 4 additional components, including Money Smart for Young Adults, Money Smart for Older Adults, Money Smart for Young People, and Money Smart for Small Businesses. The MSOA, as I will refer to Money Smart for Older Adults, was launched in 2013, jointly again with CFPB, to raise awareness among older adults, being 62 years or older, on how to prevent, identify, and respond to elder financial exploitations. And as you heard Jennifer say earlier, perpetrators include people that they know and trust, as well as strangers. And cognitive impairment diminishes the ability of some older adults to identify this, make financial decisions, detect frauds or scams. And as she also said, the cases are very complex and can be very difficult to investigate as well as prosecute. However, this program brings awareness, which is the first step. And then, of course, reporting and early intervention are vital to preventing loss and recovering loss when possible. Next slide. So the objectives of the Money Smart for Older Adults will be to recognize and reduce the risk of elder financial exploitation. It will go into the definition, and I am going to read that. The Older American Act defines elder financial exploitation quite broadly as a fraudulent or otherwise illegal, unauthorized, or improper act or process of an individual, including a caregiver or a fiduciary, that uses the resources of an older individual for monetary or personal benefit, profit, or gain, or that results in depriving an older individual of rightful access to or use of benefits, resources, belongings, or assets. Now, the module will talk about identity theft, how to plan for unexpected loss of ability to manage your finances, prepare financially for disasters, as well as a lot of other training tips and helpful resources on money management. And please remember, elder financial exploitation crosses all social, educational, and economic barriers. Please. Now, the topics will include common types of financial exploitation, and remember that can be by an agent under a power of attorney or a person in another fiduciary relationship. It could be theft of money or property by a family member, caregiver, or in-home helper. It also can specific targeted populations such as homeowners, veterans, immigrants, It's going to go over investment, fraud, and scams, various types of scams including lottery, sweepstakes, charity scams. It will discuss telemarketers, mail or sales person scams, and then it also talks about the more current identity theft, computer and internet scams, and it's going to talk about how to be financially prepared or plan for the unexpected disasters that may happen. Next slide, please. Now, MSOA was recently updated and has some new topics. The new topics talk about the phantom debt collection scam. That's where a person calls and often threatens criminal charges if a debt is not paid immediately. They do not give you any information about themselves, but yet they ask you for sensitive personal financial information. However, they often have basic information about a person so that they appear legitimate and almost always use scare tactics. It also goes into charity scams that claim to be collecting funds for an organization that doesn't even exist. It sometimes will use a sound-alike name and refuse to provide detailed information about its identity, mission, or cost, or even how the donation will be used. And again, these are typically high-pressured for an immediate donation. And then it also will go over the IRS imposter scam, which focuses on taxes that need to be paid immediately or need financial information for a big refund that they are telling you is due. Now, this revision also has a total new look. The overall look of the program is fresh. It is 508 compliant, having topics specifically aimed at helping persons with disability. And as I mentioned earlier, it now includes the new topics that are being seen in the 21st century, such as the identity theft and computer internet scam. Next slide. Now, one thing that is common in all of our Money Smart programs is all have three common elements. Those elements are an instructor guide, a participant guide, and a PowerPoint presentation. And the nice thing about all of our Money Smart presentations are they come in both PDF and Word, so that if there are certain components you would like to use, you can only use those, or you can use the entire program. And as you're going to see in the next few slides, they are very easily used. The design is user-friendly. Next slide. Now, the instructor guide is designed to walk the novice trainer through the training process with helpful training tips. It has a breakout of all the steps of the training. It has time guides for each section, from the introduction to the slide presentation. Now, you'll see the list of the presentation planning guide, icon guide, module overview. It has great activities. It has solid examples of scams, and then it always will have summary and post-test with an evaluation form. You will see examples of this on the next few slides. Next slide, please. Now, I hope you can see this. It's kind of small, but this walks you through the presentation planning guide, and you'll see that it gives you time elements on how long each component should take. It breaks out the components of each section and walks you through each activity. It's very thorough in its content and, as I said earlier, very user-friendly. Next slide. Now, you saw earlier that it had an icon guide. These icons are used throughout the instructor guide to indicate the activity type so that the instructor has a very clear picture of what is next and then gives them pointers. within the guide itself, it will give you ideas for questions, discussions, and also ideas just to initiate audience participation. Next slide, please. Now, this is an image of the instructor guide itself. This image shares a page from the actual instructor guide. And as you can see, it has exactly where you're at, what you should be anticipating. So there will be an icon for if they're at the question time, at the discussion time. It will tell you, if you can see that clearly, on the welcome. It even gives you how to introduce yourself, how to welcome people. It's very user-friendly, very easy to use. Next slide, please. And then it has a participant or resource guide. And as you see there, the resource guide is great for the individuals because it's going to give them the information that they can actually leave the presentation with, which is going to help them when they go back to their offices. It has, of course, tools and instructions. It has a glossary and then resources on managing money, reporting financial exploitation. Now, these can be ordered in bulk from CFPB. They can also be ordered on the FDIC website, which we're going to show you in a few minutes. Okay, next slide.
And Kay, before we go to the next slide, could I add something about the resource guide and the instructor guide?
Sure.
Yeah, they're both in 14-point font, which is very particularly user-friendly for older people, but also for older volunteers like myself who really appreciate the 14-point font if you're over 40. And we like to say 14's the new 12. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Now, this is the FDIC website, how to access, and the overall FDIC website is just fdic.gov. And the quickest way to get there, you'll see to the right upper corner, there is a search tool. And if you will simply type in Money Smart in that search tool, it will bring you to this page. And as you see along the left-hand side of the page, you then just click on Money Smart for older adults, or if you're interested in any of the others, those as well. So it's very simple to go to, and I love our website because we have an awful lot of information on it. Okay, now you can order it directly from the website as well. And if you will click the next slide, please.
Right, and Kay, if I could just add a little piece to this, because I do get some emails from folks who are not super clear on this. The only place you can get the PowerPoint, which is 100 slides, is by downloading from this website. The folks in the room here have been given hard copies of the instructor guide and the resource guide. Those were actually sent out. Links to them or PDFs were sent to everybody. But the PowerPoint you must download from the FDIC website. And you can download the entire module plus all the components that are available in Spanish. Thank you.
You bet. No, thank you for that. Whoops. I was just going to add to that that it'll walk you pretty clearly through in that bottom frame that you see. You'll see the download button there, and it'll download right to your computer, and it's very simple to open up. So hopefully that will help. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Yeah, and that's all I have. It seems like we are somehow we are missing your how to access, and the ordering is on my printout here, but it doesn't seem to be up here. It looks like we're moving into implementation. But I think that's okay, Kay, if it's all right with you. I mean, if you want to say more about it, that's fine. But I think once people get to the site, the FDIC.gov site, and get to the Money Smart for Older Adults that's outlined in that left-hand column, it's very straightforward to download, very straightforward.
No, I agree. I think it is, too. And I think once they get to the website, they will see that.
Okay. So the next section is on implementation. And so I can start that, and then towards the end, Kay, you will come back and talk about more resources that the FDIC has.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Okay, let's talk implementation. So let me just say that it is an absolutely 100% malleable program. You do not have to deliver it in any particular boxed way. You can take it and run with it independently as an individual, set up trainings or set up speaking engagements. You can work with community-based organizations or others. It is also often used very successfully as a tool for community partnerships with financial institutions. Financial institutions, banks mostly, but also credit unions and other financial service providers and regulators, state regulators, et cetera, have been using the Money Smart curriculum, all of the modules that Money Smart offers for what, about 15 years, Kay?
Yes, that's correct.
So financial institutions are very familiar with the program. And so it's a great way if you want to develop partnerships or collaboration with financial institutions who can help you promote your programs, et cetera. They often have community rooms. I'll get into that a little bit later. But they're very helpful with sponsoring events, and it's a great way to build bridges of communication and collaboration with financial institutions and others in the community. And speaking of others, this helps with engaging key stakeholders. Law enforcement loves to come to Money Smart for Older Adults training programs and present on the sort of cases they're seeing locally. Adult protective services as well. Very important that older people know that adult protective services is there to help them and keep them independent and safe at home for as long as possible. It gives an opportunity for you all to sort of dispel the myths and the fears that people have of asking for help, and the belief that if they ask for help or they call adult protective services or they engage with law enforcement, that they might lose their independence. This program is designed to empower older people to ask for help and to know that, to recognize and report. So APS and law enforcement, please invite them when you're doing presentations to co-present, to introduce their agency, share local stories. It's always good if they can hang around afterwards for a half hour or so, because older people sometimes won't raise their hands during a session, but they'll approach somebody afterwards to say, hey, I have a friend who's having a problem. And we've seen over the last 4 or 5 years we've been working with this, that older people are actually feeling empowered and saying, I have an issue, I signed a paper, I signed a power of attorney, I didn't know that I could revoke it until today, and I'm not really comfortable with the person who is now taking over my finances. So we've seen some really good results, and if it's just one person, it's just one person. But with all of you out there doing this work, it's a great opportunity to engage. And if you are a financial institution on the line, or if you're working with financial institutions who are presenting Money Smart for Older Adults, please encourage them, or if you are a financial institution, to collaborate with APS and law enforcement, because financial exploitation is a form of elder abuse. And there can be other things going on, such as physical abuse or sexual assault or abandonment or neglect or any other kind of elder abuse. And so sometimes these things run hand in hand, and it is very, very important to engage law enforcement and social services as much as possible to the degree that they are available with their busy schedules. And they are very helpful, and as I said, it's great for building collaboration. So they can co-present, introduce their agency, share local stories, meet privately with clients afterwards, hopefully. You may want to consider asking if there's a multidisciplinary team, a FAST team, financial abuse specialist team, or some kind of elder abuse task force or council in your community. If they are not already using Money Smart, this could be a great gift, an outreach gift that you could bring to them to help them with their prevention initiatives. We encourage organizations or task forces, networks that take on Money Smart for older adults or outreach initiatives, prevention initiatives, to set goals about the number of people you'd like to meet with in the year. Even if it's just 50 seniors a month or 25 seniors a month, it is amazing what happens when each person in the room says, I'm going to do one presentation a month, and for a minimum of 10 or 12 people. And if 4 or 5 people do that, it actually builds energy around getting it out there. And it also starts your counting and your metrics of knowing how many you've reached. And you'll be surprised when you do one presentation, say at a Rotary Club for 20 minutes or so, do a quick overview, you'll get 5 people that will come up and say, could you talk to my church group? Can you talk to my, my sewing club? Could you talk to my group? And you'll find that it just sort of blossoms and grows, and it's very exciting. But if you don't set those goals and everybody sort of nods their head and says, yeah, this is great, then we see that things can kind of like drag a little bit. So we really encourage you, when you take it on, to set a goal for yourself or your group for outreach and build that energy into it. Different types of venues. I like to say you can present this anywhere because, elder financial exploitation affects everybody in the community. So be sure to think outside of the box. I'll just give you an example. I'm not going to run down the list. I think you all know where seniors are in your communities. But I'll give you an example, and I mentioned Sewing Club earlier. It was many years ago when I was in San Francisco that I had a request at a presentation to come and address a sewing club. And I thought, sewing club, why would they want to hear about elder financial exploitation? And it was 6 or 7 women who met every Saturday to do little repairs for their neighbors and friends and make a little money, and they also liked to do their needle points. And it was sort of a social group, but it had a purpose. Well, it turned out one of the ladies, they were very concerned about her. She was had some cognitive impairment coming on, and she was really excited about this money she had won from a foreign country for a lottery, and she was sharing this information in the sewing club. And they asked me to come, and it was a Saturday afternoon, and I didn't want to work on a Saturday afternoon. But when I heard this, I thought, okay. And they said, don't come in a suit, bring something that you want to sew. And so I found something that needed a little mending, and I showed up with that and a little bag of cookies and sat down, and we just had a very casual conversation, and it was like, what do you do? So, Jennifer, what do you do? And when I told them that I work to protect elders from financial abuse, oh, what does that look like? And I started to talk about various and sundry things, and then I got to the lottery scams, and the woman looked up, and her eyes got really big, and she recognized herself. And we were able to gently and tactfully intervene with her and make her aware and ask her about her family members. Anyway, it made the connection, and that was one person on a Saturday afternoon who I feel like we really saved. We were able to intervene with her. So open your mind about where you can go. I know I'm not asking you to go to sewing clubs on Saturday afternoons, but you never know where you're going to get a hit on something like this and provide great benefit. But retirement groups, key clubs, there are a lot of older adult ministries out there. The Lutheran Church has older adult ministries, and they will have older adults that meet once a month. There are widow support groups. Those are great because people who are in grief states are often targeted. They're more vulnerable. They may have depended on their spouse to manage their money, and they're suddenly thrust into doing it themselves. There was a low vision group that I used to meet with in California once a year and hit the low vision groups because they also were fairly dependent on other people to help them with shopping and were giving out money and whatnot. So open your minds about what's possible. There are lots and lots of possibilities. So I have about 20 minutes before Naomi comes on. What I want to do is just run through the overview of elder financial exploitation. I just want to say that it's a little bit difficult to do this by webinar. I've done it several times, so I will do my best to make it engaging. It's easier since I have people in the room. I'm going to demonstrate for you how we suggest that you present these slides. It's sort of a technique. So I will go ahead and use the folks in the room here to engage, and then hopefully you'll hear them. And if they ask questions, or I'll repeat back. So let me ask you all, what is elder financial exploitation? up with some words. How would you describe it, or what would you call it?
Deception.
Deception.
Something, right.
Yep. Deception with the intent to steal. Exactly. Right. There you go. Any other sort of thoughts? I mean, that pretty much sums it up, but there's probably other words out there.
That could be straight theft.
Straight theft. That's exactly what we're looking for.
I'm just in your house.
Yeah. So straight theft, such as a housekeeper or a caregiver or somebody in your home who starts helping themselves to things, starts slipping that $10 bill out of the wallet every week, and then it goes to 20, and then it goes to 2 20s. They start opening the mail, et cetera. Let me help you pay your bills. Any others? Depriving an older person of their resources. Yes. Such as? Their money, their belongings, their food, benefits, Social Security, et cetera. Right. So this is great. Thank you. And here is sort of the answer, and Kay put this out up front. This is sort of drawn from the definition in the Older Americans Act, but I like to read this out loud to my senior audience sitting here. They're all young. They're pretending to be seniors for me today. But elder financial exploitation is the fraudulent or otherwise illegal, unauthorized, or improper act or process of an individual that uses the resources of an older person for their own personal benefit, profit, or gain. Basically, these are actions that result in depriving an older person of their rightful access to or use of their own benefits, their resources, their belongings, or their assets. And I read this, I encourage you to read it out loud, because what you're looking at the screen, an older person is looking, your older audience is looking at the screen. They're taking it in from your voice, from your eye contact, which I didn't give a lot of eye contact at the moment, but your eye contact. They're looking at the screen with great big font that's probably 200-300 point font up there, and they're hearing it, and that helps them to absorb. So next question, who is at risk of being financially exploited? Is it only people with dementia? It would be anybody. Anybody. So it's not just people with a lot of money, right? So it can be anyone, absolutely. So anyone can be the victim of elder financial exploitation. It crosses all social, educational, and economic boundaries. Now, often when this question is asked of an older audience, they will say, you know, people with money, people who are senile, they'll use whatever words, and this is what the myth you're trying to dispel. The next question, and I'm actually, what I have is a printout of the slides in front of me, which you may have your instructor guide in front of you where you can see your slides and you can ask the question, and you'll see your question icon in there to help you with prompting you. The next question is, why are older adults at risk? Why are they targeted? Trusting, yes indeed, more trusting of people. An error of trust. Or their trust is gained through deception. Exactly. Other reasons why older people are exploited?
Yes.
So they may have some vulnerabilities that make them a target. They may live alone. They may have some cognitive impairment or some other, yay, we have participation on the screen. Thank you. Feel free to plug in. Anne, thank you for saying they're often isolated or lonely. So go ahead. Any other reasons why they are at risk or why they are targeted? Because they have the money, accumulated wealth, indeed. A lot of older people don't think they have any money, but they don't realize that their Social Security and a couple of pensions, the equity in their home, and maybe a little savings account is a direct target. And they don't often realize how much their funds have grown over the years, especially if it's a widow who perhaps has not been looking at the statements and doesn't know what she has. Any other reasons? Okay, well, here we go. Have regular income, trusting and polite, lonely and socially isolated, vulnerable due to grief from a loss or other. We have Kendra saying elders may occupy property that others want to develop or their neighbors want to develop. We've heard about this in Florida a lot of pressure to push people out of their homes on the beachfront and other places as well. They are often very reluctant to report exploitation by a family member, a caregiver, or someone they depend on for multiple reasons. And they obviously could be very dependent on the perpetrator, who could be a family member or caregiver, to support them, and they remain independent. They also may be receiving care from a person who has financial issues, a family member who's a little hard up and wants a loan, or a caregiver who puts out there that they have had a family emergency or something and they need a loan. They may fear retaliation, often unfamiliar with managing financial matters, may not have planned for the potential loss of decision-making capacity, cognitive impairment. With cognitive impairment, the capacity to manage finances is the first capacity to go, usually. And, of course, the dependency on someone who may pressure them for money. What are some examples of elder financial exploitation? What do you see out there? Pardon me?
Fishing. Or from like
Yeah, so the first answer was sort of internet scams, which I find kind of an interesting answer because 10 years ago, that would not have been a common way for an older person to be scammed. But times have changed.
And they're always right. They could.
Sure.
So it's always cheap, I think.
It is hard to stay on top. And I just want to mention that 10 years ago or 15 years ago when I first, well, more like 15 years ago when I first started doing this, I used to ask a group of seniors in a room, and I remember a group of 100 seniors in a room, and I said, how many of you are on the internet? And I'm raising my hand. This has something to do with them, is how many? Ask them and get them to open themselves up, raise their hands. How many of you are on the internet? And it used to be that only 3 or 4 hands would go up. Now it's 3 or 4 hands don't go up. It's completely reversed. People are retiring with computer skills. Elders are compelled to be text compatible and to get on the internet because they want to keep up with their grandkids. They want to stay in communication. They want to see pictures. You go to an AARP conference with 20,000 seniors, and it's rare not to see them standing around showing pictures to each other. Times have changed. So, yes, there's huge vulnerability there. And your answer was, I'm sorry? Oh, big gifts to family members that are inappropriate and cause them to deprive themselves. Yeah, that's sort of a self-neglect situation. Yeah. What are some other ways that elders are exploited? So consumer fraud by commercial service providers like auto repair folks, home improvement. I've heard a lot about duct cleaning. Like these companies come around, they want to clean your ducts, and they get these fancy devices and say, oh, look, this is just full of mites and it's full of stuff and it's going to cause a fire and we need to do, hundreds and hundreds of dollars worth of work. And then they do it and the amount keeps increasing. What else? How else? What are some other ways that elders...
I had a great-grandmother who
Yeah.
all like family heirlooms, like everything.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know if you folks can hear on the line. Are you able to hear the gentleman in the front that just told a little story?
We did not.
Okay, so he just told a little story about his own grandmother, a personal accounting of his own grandmother who hired a moving company, and the moving company clearly was a shady, unestablished moving company, somebody, who knows how she found him, and they came over and loaded up all her stuff and drove away, and that was it. Everything was gone, every possession she owned. That is, now, the point of this is not because you need to know as professionals all of these scams and frauds, because you do. The point of this exercise is to get your audience to speak up and to tell, and so the audience starts putting out the information in a way that you are all talking to each other, right? You want older people to raise their voices. You want them to start talking about this out loud. You want them to be engaged in the presentation. So here are all the examples. I mean, it's not all the examples, but it is a number of examples. In-home care providers, yes. Caregivers.
I just heard another story about it was actually from a person that removed the bathroom. Or there was something in Omaha. There people were going around and back, give us another 20. That basically was it, and they took off.
Yep. We have a question there. Sweetheart scammers. Very good. Who says we can't hear anything? The sound is going in and out. I think I might accidentally press the button. Oh, okay. All right. Can you hear us now out there?
Yep. Yes, now we can, but it was going in and out.
All right. So you can hear now. Good. Sorry about that. We tried to make the room more audible here with an extension, and well, it's working now. Okay. So we saw sweetheart scammers on here. That's great. So the point of this is not, again, to get you to tell us what you already know, and if you don't know, it's all in the training. But the point of this is to get your audience to answer questions and to engage. And it's particularly important on the who are the abusers, and then the next question, why don't older adults report exploitation? Because it's so important that they say this out loud, that they acknowledge as a group that it's family members, that they acknowledge that it's caregivers, that they acknowledge that it's people that come to do home repairs, et cetera, et cetera. Because, and especially when they hear it from each other, there's something very powerful about that. And also getting them to raise their voices. It helps to shine lights on the issue and to sort of lift that taboo and lift that cloud of secrecy that seems to surround the issue of elder financial exploitation. So here we go. Family members and caregivers, friends, neighbors, and acquaintances speaks to the answer that it can be anyone. People you know. Agents under a power of attorney, that's huge. We're going to have a little in-depth on that shortly. Financial advisors, etc. So the next question is, why don't older people report when they are being. Go ahead. Shame and embarrassment. Carol has just, and Margaret, dueling shame and embarrassment. That's right. And then we have, what else? They don't want to get anyone in trouble. Loyalty to a family member or even a hired caregiver who may have befriended them and told them what? Caregivers sometimes say to older people, don't tell anyone, or it's our secret. And if you tell somebody, what might happen? Retaliation. What does that look like? Lose their independence, and then what happens if they lose their independence? Right. In a nursing home, perhaps? Right. And I will often ask people, how many of you are looking forward to going to a nursing home? And you usually see the answer is no. And I don't mean it as a slight against really good, assisted living and care, but people generally really want to stay in place. They want to be independent at home as much as possible. They do not want to go to a nursing home. We have a good answer from Debbie here about not wanting to cause a fuss. Well, I know what a fuss looks like. If you call the police and they respond code 3, lights and sirens, wake up the whole neighborhood and everybody comes around to see what's going on. That's not good. They have a perception that law enforcement will respond code 3 to these sorts of things. And they'll cause a fuss in their family, embarrassment of that. And sometimes elders, they don't realize that it's happening, for sure. And paperwork was signed many years prior. They're under an undue influence situation, or there are forged signatures. Okay, all great answers. And who are abusers already? We did. There we go. So shame and embarrassment, you got that right. Good answers right off the top. The loyalty to a family member, excellent. The fear of retaliation, dependence on the abuser, especially if it's somebody who is in your family. They may be codependent. They might be living with the older person and dependent on the older person for housing, and the elder is dependent on them for the support, for taking out the garbage, driving them to doctor's appointments, etc. Denial, not wanting to believe it's happening. Self-blame. The abuser is somebody who has a son or daughter that has drug or alcohol problems. They feel like it was their fault somehow that their life that they did not thrive, and this is the sort of outcome, that they just have to care for this person and they don't have any choice. They have.
One item I thought about when you first asked the question was, I may not be sure. I may be hesitant to take any action because I just suspect something isn't right.
Yeah.
Brain?
Yeah.
Did I have $40 in my wallet?
Right.
Especially as you got older and reluctantly, that not quite clicking on the same cylinders I was 10 years ago. Maybe so.
Self-doubt.
I'm not certain. I want to cry wolf.
Self-doubt and second-guessing. And that definitely happens a lot, especially with people who are in the early stages of cognitive impairment. Maybe I put that ring somewhere, and maybe I didn't have that much money in my wallet, and I spent it. I don't think this person would do this to me. I'm just getting a little dotty or a little forgetful. Yeah, so that's definitely the case. And then there's just the flat-out lack of awareness, especially if with mild cognitive impairment or cognitive impairment, where the perpetrator or the suspect has diverted the mail, and they just can't see what's going on. They've put in a change of mail address, and their statements are going elsewhere. Okay, so who can help? And I often will ask, who do you call? Who are you going to call? If it's your neighbor, your friend, or yourself, does anybody know who to call if you need help? Go ahead and answer. And I see Kendra has put another great answer up here, that sometimes elders and friends report, but the complaints are screened out and never investigated. That actually does happen a lot in states where Adult Protective Services has a restriction around their response, where they can only respond to somebody who has cognitive impairment or who is, quote, disabled. And if the person actually calls and asks for help themselves, it shows that they're not disabled, you know. If they're able to make the call, then they're not disabled. They get screened out. Or a financial institution will make a report, even a mandated report in a mandated reporting state, but the Adult Protective Services program will screen out the report and not investigate. And that's incredibly frustrating for financial institutions. But it also creates, I want to just say it's not a dead end, it also creates an opportunity for collaboration. Because in these situations, cross-reporting to law enforcement is extremely important, because elder financial exploitation is theft, right? Theft is under the penal code. So always encourage your financial institutions that if APS can't respond or investigate for whatever reason, to report to law enforcement. Because if law enforcement opens a criminal case or does an investigation, they may be able to intervene. They may be able to scare the perpetrator off. They may be able to cross-report to social services and have it get screened in through law enforcement. I always say don't stop, look for other ways. Okay, so who can help? We say Adult Protective Services, call them first. And we also want older people to know, especially since they're on the internet, that they can get all kinds of help by going to eldercare.gov. And we also really want you to consider getting this out to family caregivers, people who are sort of 40, 45 plus, who may be looking out for, they may be financial caregivers for an older person. This is the phone number to call. All they have to do is plug in their zip code or tell the person on the line their zip code, and they'll be connected to local Adult Protective Services or the Area Agency on Aging. And at that point, they can get all kinds of help. They can get help with housing referrals and with legal assistance referrals and all the things that the Area Agency on Aging provides. And bankers find this very, very helpful. I think everybody finds this very helpful, because if your victim is, say, a snowbird, and they are in an area where they're getting ripped off, but their financial, their bank or their accounts are in another state, you may need to get to APS in that other state to do some collaboration. So this is very helpful for interstate information. And then, of course, the local police. We always recommend that you contact the local police, especially if you feel that the person is in danger or that a crime has been committed. Okay, so we need to take about a 5 to 7 minute break here to queue up our next speaker. So, operator, are you handy?
I'm right here.
Robin, great. So we're going to take a break for about 5 to 7 minutes. I say we come back just right about 10 after. If you'll all excuse us for a minute, we've been dealing with a little bit of technical challenge here this morning. Not sure why, but we have had difficulty loading up the second presentation. So we're going to concentrate really hard and get it up for you all, and then we'll introduce Naomi Karp.
Thank you for standing by. The call has resumed.
Hi, everybody. Jennifer Duane back again. We're going to do the next segment here with Naomi Karp on diminished capacity, vulnerability, and elder financial exploitation. There was a question. I apologize that we are having a little bit of technical difficulty, but we are getting through this, and we are determined. The question was, how long is Naomi's presentation? And it's about an hour. We encourage your questions in the Q&A. I can see them. Nobody else can, so I will keep track and do my best to facilitate Q&A. We may just want to wait till Naomi's pretty well finished, unless we'll run with it. So that'll be about an hour, and then we have about 30 or 45 minutes of wrap-up at the end with some important and valuable resources, et cetera, for you that complement the Money Smart for Older Adults program and will help you kind of beef up your arsenal of tools when you take it to the street. So with that, I want to introduce Naomi Karp, esteemed colleague of mine in the Office for Older Americans at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. We work side by side on elder financial exploitation projects and initiatives, and she is a world-renowned expert on cognitive impairment, guardianships, on financial institution matters. Anyway, Naomi, introduce yourself, please.
Thank you, Jennifer, and you are way too kind, and I don't know about the world-renowned, but I have been working on these issues for a long time. So you'll see on your screen that we have a different PowerPoint up, so we're jumping away from the Money Smart PowerPoint right now. Let me just tell you a little bit about what I'm going to do during the next little while. I'm going to go through this deck, which has some information about diminished capacity, cognitive impairment, vulnerability, advanced planning, and all of these things do link with elder financial exploitation. So this is information that we thought would be useful to you to have, to add to your knowledge. You can use this information to supplement the Money Smart Older Adults curriculum and just for your own knowledge. So I'm going to give you some background on that, on fiduciaries, different types of fiduciaries, different ways to do advanced planning. Then I'm going to cover one of those other resources that Jennifer just alluded to that our office at the CFPB has created, and that is our Managing Someone Else's Money Guides. And then finally, we'll go back to the Money Smart slides that you've been seeing, and I'll just run quickly through the Money Smart slides on fiduciary abuse, power of attorney abuse, and abuse by other types of fiduciaries. I'm not going to read them all necessarily, but just see what they are in the presentation deck that you have and how they fit in with the material that I've gone through. So Jennifer, let's move to the next slide. This is just our disclaimer that we're required to do as federal government, and we can move on from that. So this is just a little bit of background for you on diminished capacity. And I know Jennifer has mentioned earlier that financial skills do decline as someone moves into cognitive impairment. And as she alluded, often the ability to manage money and property, those financial skills, are some of the first types of capacity to go. And they even decline with mild cognitive impairment, or MCI. Mild cognitive impairment is a diagnosis that's prior to dementia. So many people will have mild cognitive impairment and then it will progress into dementia. Some people just have mild cognitive impairment and not get dementia. People with mild cognitive impairment often are not having any trouble with their activities of daily living, you know, bathing, dressing, that type of thing, but they are starting to have some problems with the instrumental activities of daily living that includes money management. So even among family members and relatives, mild cognitive impairment might not be easy to detect. The person looks very put together, they're still going about their activities. But one of those financial skills, or one element of financial capacity, is the judgment to detect whether something is a scam or a fraud. And so these people are maybe starting to have impaired judgment. So not only are they doing things like forgetting to pay bills or paying a bill twice, but they also may just be more vulnerable to those scammers or to those trusted and known people who are out to rip them off. And mild cognitive impairment is pretty prevalent. One study showed that 22% of people over age 71 have mild cognitive impairment. And then we just have a couple of other statistics here about Alzheimer's disease, because we have already discussed that sort of nexus between that type of vulnerability and being exploited. So 1 in 10 people over age 65 have Alzheimer's disease. And when you get up into the older, about 1/3 of people 85 and older have Alzheimer's. Moving to the next slide. So we've done some work here at the CFPB because part of our role at helping people with their later life economic security is encouraging people to do advanced planning. And that advanced planning might be in the healthcare arena in terms of advanced healthcare directives, but people need to do financial advanced planning. And people don't like to think about the fact that in later life they may develop cognitive impairments, may get dementia, and may not be able to manage their own affairs. But we like to encourage people to try to imagine themselves older. There was a study where students, college students, were asked to imagine an older version of themselves and were actually given photos. You know, a computer took a photo and generated what they might look like when they were older. And once they saw that, they actually were more apt to do things like save more and plan for themselves. So we want them to imagine an older you who may have some cognitive impairment and protect themselves. One reason people should plan in advance and name someone to handle their money and property if they no longer can is because we really like people to avoid guardianship. Guardianship is a court process where someone files a petition and a court then would have to name someone as a guardian, or in your state it might be called a conservator. They're called different things in different states. But that's not really the way we hope to go. It's a lengthy process. It can be very expensive for family members or other petitioners. It's public, and it's just emotionally really difficult. So advanced planning allows you to avoid guardianship. And in a strange way, planning ahead may help the person stay in control of their finances, even though they're not actually doing that daily management, in that they get to select the person who is going to manage money and property and can feel secure in the knowledge. And so in terms of the advanced planning and what you yourself can do, a private arrangement putting in place, that includes powers of attorney and trusts. And I'm going to talk some more about powers of attorney, and I will also define some of the other types of fiduciaries, but I think we'll spend the most time on powers of attorney because that's probably the most common planning tool. So moving to the next slide. This slide gives you a little bit of background on what is a power of attorney. So power of attorney, the document, the piece of paper that people often will drop with the help of an attorney because the document should be tailored to that individual person's situation. It's a document that gives us a third-party legal authority to make financial decisions. And powers of attorney can be used other than for situations where the person loses capacity. So, for example, you might be going on a trip, but there's some business that needs to be conducted in your hometown while you're away. You could give someone a power of attorney just to manage that. Let's say you need someone to attend a closing on your house and you can't be there. So that's the type of thing. But in this context, we're talking about planning for incapacity. So the person who does the advanced planning and signs the document is called the principal, and the person they're giving the authority to, you know, son, daughter, sister, brother, best friend, whomever, is called the agent under a power of attorney. You may hear about the phrase durable power of attorney, and those are the ones that are the most useful for advanced planning. So durable means that even if you lose capacity, that power of attorney remains in effect. They weren't always like that, but now most powers of attorney are durable. You may have heard of healthcare powers of attorney. Again, those are called different things in different states, but it's different. That's for making your healthcare decisions, although the two may be very connected. So if there's a healthcare proxy or a healthcare agent and a financial power of attorney, those people are going to want to work together at some point. After signing a power of attorney, people who still, full capacity can still manage their money and property as long as they have the ability to make the decisions. And then it might be fully turned over to that agent at a later point when they can no longer. And it's often not sort of like a bright line between one another. It may happen sort of gradually over time. So let's go to the next slide, Jen. So powers of attorney are great advanced planning tools, but they're also risky. So when you create a power of attorney, you're granting a lot of authority to that third party, and there's nothing in the law generally or in that arrangement that provides for any kind of regular oversight, although I will mention ways that you could build in some oversight. And so powers of attorney are kind of a two-edged sword. On the one hand, it's a great way to put that arrangement in place, but on the other hand, people sometimes call powers of attorney a license to steal, because you're giving so much authority typically to that third party to manage your bank accounts, maybe brokerage accounts, your home, other types of property that you may own. So here are some different ways that agents under powers of attorney may abuse that authority. So sometimes the agent, that third party, might be a relative who pressures the older person to grant more authority than they really want to grant, or they may pressure them to create the power of attorney in the first place. Another way, and this is probably the thing that we see most commonly when we see those news clips about, somebody was arrested who had a power of attorney. The agent takes the money or the property and uses it for his or her own gain rather than for the principal's benefit. And we'll talk a little bit later about what are some of the duties. This is clearly a violation. The money is to be spent for the person whose money it is, not for this agent. Agent exceeding authority, that's sort of related to the last one, but a little bit different. So maybe the document just gives you certain authority, like it gives you the ability to give gifts in the amount of, $1,000 or less. Well, the agent might make a gift of $10,000 or make a gift to him or herself that wasn't authorized. So that's exceeding authority. And then finally, it's a forgery. So, we may see someone fake that power of attorney, and the principal never actually created a power of attorney. So let's move on to the next slide. So what are some ways when you're creating a power of attorney to minimize risk? And these are things people might want to talk to a lawyer about when they're creating it. So the first I call trust but verify. You could actually put in that power of attorney document that your agent is required to provide regular things to another trusted third party. So let's say you have 3 children, one of them lives in your city, is most convenient, and is good at managing money. You might name that person as your agent. But you have another child who lives somewhere else, but you also trust that child. You could require child number 1 to provide some accounting of how you've spent the money every 6 months or every year. Another is just more informally telling other friends, relatives, or financial advisors that you have created a power of attorney who you've named and to kind of keep an eye out and watch for you. And then if you decide over time you've created a power, let's say you've named child number 1, and then child number 1's situation changes, they develop a gambling habit or a drinking problem or lose their job and they're hard up for money and you just, or they become ill, you just think that's not the right person for you anymore. It's not written in stone. You can change it, you can revoke it, in other words, cancel it and create a new power of attorney naming someone else. So moving to the next. So we often hear that a good way to plan for the possibility of incapacity or just to get some more help with your finances is, oh, just put that second person, that helper, on your bank account. Let's make it a joint bank account. So let's say mom is declining, she can't get out so much, or she doesn't see well anymore, so she can't write her checks. Let's mom and daughter will go to the bank and put the daughter on the account, and then we don't have to worry about a power of attorney or a trust. They're just on the account. Well, there are clearly some risks of joint bank accounts, and it still may be a good idea for someone, or someone may be very comfortable with it, but they should be aware of those risks. So I'll just mention a couple of risks. And typically I think of 3 things. One is once you put that other person on just a traditional joint bank account, that person has just as much access to the money as you do. So they can spend it, let's say it's mom's money, but daughter's on the account. Daughter can take the money out and go on a trip to Hawaii or buy a whole new wardrobe or whatever, and they have the authority to do that once they're on that joint account. And maybe that's not what mom had in mind because it's mom's money. Secondly, let's say daughter has a lot of debt. So she's got creditors, and at some point creditors may be going after her. Creditors can get at that bank account to try to satisfy the debts of daughter. And again, that's mom's money. That's probably not what she had in mind. And finally, mom may have an estate plan. She may have a will, and a joint account might undermine mom's estate plan. So let's say mom has 3 children. She only puts one of them on the joint account. In her will, it says, when I die, I want my property split equally between my 3 children. Well, a joint account with right of survivorship means that daughter number 1 gets the money that's in that account, and maybe that wasn't what mom had in mind when she wrote her will. So we like to talk about another option. These are available in some states, some banks. They're called convenience accounts or agency accounts or multi-party accounts without right of survivorship. Those are accounts where it makes it clear that that second person who was added to the account is the helper. They're not the owner of the money. They're just the helper. And when mom dies, they don't get the money. So that may be a safer way to have a joint bank account. Okay, on to the next slide. So we have worked with one of our partner federal financial regulator agencies, the SEC, or Securities and Exchange Commission. They work in the realm of securities, broker-dealers, financial advisors, et cetera. And we got together and we put out a consumer resource called Planning for Diminished Capacity and Illness. It goes over some of the material that I've gone over with you up to this point in the presentation, and it has some other useful, very hands-on, actionable information, and we have a link here for you. And you can find that on our website or the SEC website. Again, it's called Planning for Diminished Capacity and Illness. So we hope you'll take a look at that. You can download it, you can make copies, you can give them out at Money Smart or other presentations that you're doing. Next slide. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about our Managing Someone Else's Money guides that I mentioned before. And what was the problem that we saw out there that we wanted to address by putting out these guides? So the challenge we saw was, as we've been talking, declining capacity to handle finances can make older people vulnerable in the sense of, you know, their finances just may go into disarray or they may get ripped off. So with diminished capacity, often need a surrogate of some sort, and, you know, someone to stand in their shoes and handle their money and property. Most people who do play that role, we like to call them financial caregivers, but formally they're called fiduciaries, and I'll talk about what that is in a minute. Most of those people are lay people. They're not professionals. They're family members, they're friends, they're someone in the community. They're a critical source of help because, you know, as we saw, so many people do have the ability to manage finances in later life. So they're critical, but they often don't have any training. Many of them may be really lousy at managing their own money, and all of a sudden they have this heavy responsibility for managing someone else's money. And as we talked about with power of attorney abuse, some of them do commit fraud. But in creating these guides, our was that most people who are these lay fiduciaries, these family members and friends, are trying to do the right thing. They just may not know how. They may not understand their legal duties, their ethical duties, and they may not understand how to protect that person from financial exploitation and scams by third parties. So, next slide. We had an initiative to create plain language guides for these lay fiduciaries. And in 2013, we released our first set of Managing Someone Else's Money guides. These were national guides, useful in any state in the country. So initially, we were going to put out one guide, but we really wanted to be able to help 4 different types of fiduciaries. And there were enough differences that we decided to create 4 guides. And so you see on your screen the 4 types of fiduciaries. And I'm going to run through what each of those fiduciaries is and does. Next slide. Slide, please.
Naomi, stand by. For some reason, it's not forwarding. Operator.
Okay.
There we go.
No, it should be the next one after that. Okay, here we go. So this is just a picture of what our Managing Someone Else's Money guides look like. The first couple of years that the CFPB existed, our colors are green and white. All of our guides were green and white. The problem was we had 4 different guides for 4 types of fiduciaries, and people were mixing them up. So now we have this lovely range of teal and blue and purple and orangey red, and so this is what they look like. And as I'll mention later, you're able to order these free and in bulk in addition to downloading them. So moving on. So we talked to lay fiduciaries or financial caregivers around the country to hear about the challenges and the needs, and I just want to show you what a couple of them said to us. So as I'll tell you in a few minutes, we also have created some sets of state-specific guides, and the first set of those state-specific guides were for Virginia. And we had a launch event for those guides, and we were able to find a financial caregiver to come and tell her story, and that was Kristen. Now, Kristen is a fiduciary for her brother. He is actually a younger with a disability. He was in a terrible car wreck. He had traumatic brain injury. He had many other injuries many, many surgeries. His wife had been the driver. Their marriage fell apart, and Kristen ended up being the caregiver for her brother. Kristen is the vice president of a credit union. So Kristen is very financially sophisticated. She's very smart. She's very knowledgeable. But she said to us, even though I'm a financially savvy individual, I had no idea where to get help. She had no idea what it was to be a fiduciary, how to get disability, Social Security disability payments to go to her, how to manage the money. And she said, I really, when I first took on that role, that I had had guides like these. And then we talked to Hector in Florida. Hector's mother, who was elderly and became impaired, she developed dementia. She was financially exploited by another relative, and she lost a lot of money. Hector had to go and move in with his mother and start managing her finances. And I wish that every caregiver, every financial caregiver, every fiduciary would have the attitude that Hector had. He said, when you have to take care of someone else's finances, you feel more responsible for their affairs than you do for your own. It's overwhelming. Well, not sure everyone has that attitude, but he was very, very diligent and ethical and responsible. Next slide, please. So what is a fiduciary? I keep using that term, and I don't know how many of you out there who are listening are lawyers, but we have a very simple definition of what a fiduciary is. It's anyone named to manage money or property for someone else. Very simple. So anyone who is named and gets that legal authority to manage the money. Next slide. So what's a power of attorney? We actually already discussed this, and that distinction of the principal and the agent, so we can move on quickly from that one. So what is a rep payee or a Social Security representative payee? And what is a VA fiduciary? These are the government fiduciaries. So when you are receiving Social Security, whether it's disability or retirement payments, or you're getting some kind of a VA benefit, and then there are other benefits from other federal agencies, that government agency may appoint someone to manage, let's call her mom's benefits, if she needs help. The Social Security Administration calls it a representative payee or rep payee. The VA calls that person a VA fiduciary. Here's an important fact about this type of fiduciary. They only have authority to manage the money in that benefit check. So let's say mom got a Social Security check, she also has a pension, she also has some money in a bank account, and she owns a house. That Social Security rep payee or the VA fiduciary can only manage that check. They can't manage the other pension, they can't manage the house, they can't manage money in the bank account other than the money that came from that check. So sometimes we may actually see someone have more than one type of fiduciary. They might have a rep payee, they could have a VA fiduciary, they might also have a power of attorney, agent under power of attorney, or a court-appointed guardian or conservator. Next slide. So what's a guardian of property? We talked about that before. This is the second type of fiduciary that you can't name yourself in advance, although you could specify if I have to have a guardian, this is my preferred person, but it's not binding on a court. So this is where a court names someone to manage the money and property. The guardian of property is different than the guardian of the person, and again, these terms vary. I don't know what terms you have in Nebraska, but you might need to have a guardian of the person who could make your personal decisions like health care, where you want to live, that type of thing. It could be the same person, it could be a different person. You might have a trust company or a trust department of a bank named to be a guardian of property, and a family member named to be the guardian of the person. It varies. Okay, next slide. So finally, our fourth, what is a trustee? And so for these, there are different types of trusts, and here we're really getting kind of into legalese. So for our guide, we're talking about what are called revocable living trusts. So this is one where you can plan in advance. Mom signs a legal document called a living trust, and let's say she makes her son the trustee. Mom has to actually transfer the ownership of the money and the property to the trust. And the trustee can then pay her bills or do other financial management using the trust. And then there's another third party, and those are the beneficiaries. So mom may be the beneficiary of the trust, but there may be other beneficiaries too, and those beneficiaries may share whatever is left of mom's money or property when she dies. It would be distributed. This is all going to be according to the terms of the trust, and we're not going to get into that today. And clearly someone would need to go to a lawyer to set up a trust. So moving on. So what's in the guide? And again, I kind of gave you a heads up on this before. The guides walk these fiduciaries through their duties, and we've divided them into 4 duties that I'll show you in a minute. Then we tell them how to watch out for scams and financial exploitation and what to do if their loved one is a victim. And then we have a where to go for help section. National guides, those are more generic and more national resources, and in our state-specific guides, they're more specific to the state. Okay, let's look at the next slide. What are those 4 basic duties of a fiduciary? And we took the legal jargon and we translated it into plain English. So the first is about conflict of interest. Act only in mom's interest and avoid conflict. And we give some examples. So whose car is it? So our hypothetical example is that, let's say you're the agent under power of attorney, you take some of mom's money and you use it to buy a car. Well, you do use that money to drive mom around sometimes. You may take her to the, but most of the time you're using that car for your own use. Is that a conflict of interest? Well, that very well may be. Or let's say mom's house needs some repair and your son does carpentry work. So you give that work to your son, but maybe your son doesn't charge the lowest rate, or maybe he doesn't do the best work. So that may be a conflict of interest too. The second duty is about managing mom's money and property carefully. And we talk about things like making a list of all the assets and the debts, or an inventory, you could call that. Making sure that she gets any monetary benefits that public benefits that she may be entitled to. Managing her investments properly. Then the third is keeping her money and property separate. So we encourage people to avoid joint accounts. It makes it hard to track whose money is what. Knowing how to sign. If you're an agent under a power of attorney, say you're not going to just sign mom's name, you're going to sign your name and indicate that you're acting as agent under power of attorney. And then fourth, keeping good records. So you want to always keep a list of receipts, expenditures that you make. Preferably you want to avoid cash because it's hard to have a paper trail and keep those good records. And you're going to have to file accountings for certain things, like if you are a court-appointed guardian, you're going to have to file an accounting with the court. And so we talk about that and keeping records for that purpose. slide. So I mentioned the state-specific guides. The national guides they're great in every state, but there's a lot of information, you know, it may be little differences in the law, the names of different things, whether it's called a guardian or a conservator, different practices in different states, and then obviously different state and local agencies and resources. So we set out to create state-specific guides for 6 states, and you see them on the screen here: Arizona, Florida, Georgia, Illinois, Oregon, and Virginia. And so far we have released 4 sets of those guides. So Florida, Illinois, Oregon, and Virginia guides already exist. You can find them on our website. You can order them. We are almost done with and getting ready to launch our Georgia guides, and then last but not least, our Arizona guides. But what about the other 44 states and the territories, you may be thinking? What about my state? What about Nebraska? So we wanted to make it really easy for experts, people with some knowledge in this area and the other states, to take our guides and adapt them and create state-specific guides for their states. So we created what we called templates and tips. So the templates are word versions of the national guides with specific things highlighted to suggest, hey, here's a place where you might want to have some state-specific content. Those Word documents, we have them as Word documents so that you can very easily work in them. You can download them from our website and just create your own guides. And then we put out a set of 10 tips, a process for how can you get together with experts in your state and work to adapt the guides. And so this is my pitch. I really hope you folks there, whether you're in Nebraska or elsewhere, elder law attorneys, legal services attorneys, state legal services developers, court staff, judges, there's quite a few different types of experts who can come together and adapt the guides. So two big states have already done this. I'm really excited. Texas has created their own guides, and they're out now using our tips and templates. Michigan has just an initiative, and I think they've launched that already, and others are working on it. So we really hope you will pull together and do something. We would like to see these replicated all around the country. Next slide. So I think I already covered this. How are they different? You know, it's law issues, it's practice issues, and it's the where to go for help. Moving on. So how can you get the guides and the tips and templates? We have a landing page on our website for all of these managing someone else's money guides and materials, and very easy to access. You can place those bulk orders. You can order hundreds at a time. If you are doing a Money Smart training, if you are doing other things, if you run, you know, other types of programs, or if you are an aging services provider, you want to target those financial caregivers. If you have caregiving initiatives, you know, you may be talking a lot about how you can help people with long-term care needs and health needs. Well, how about financial needs? So let's get those guides out there. We hope that you will use them and supplement the Money Smart training with them. Next slide. So this is my email address, naomi.karp@cfpb.gov. I'm happy to hear from any of you afterwards with any questions about this, comments. Hey, I want to adapt the guides for my state. Can you give me some technical assistance? Yes. So love to hear from you. So I think at this point, we are going to switch back to the other deck. Here we are. So let's see. I think we want to move up one or, yeah. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is just quickly run through the slides in the Money Smart deck that cover power of attorney abuse and other fiduciary abuse. And so you can see, oops, did we skip one? Here we go. So we start out with one just generally about exploitation by a fiduciary, and we have that same simple definition of what is a fiduciary, and we've taken those 4 duties from our Managing Someone Else's Money Guides and put them on the slide here too. The next one so here we are defining what is a power of attorney. Again, this is a lot of the information that I shared with you is on this slide, just in a very kind of brief and simple way. And then some of those risks of a power of attorney and that big, caution here, be careful. You don't want someone to pressure you to grant more authority than you want to give, misuse your funds, or take actions that you didn't give them the power. Here we explain about durable powers of attorney and how an attorney, as in lawyer, can help you make the right for you. Here are some of those safeguards we talked about. Trust, verify. You can always revoke it. You might want to avoid certain types of people like hired caregivers, or that new best friend who comes along and says, hey, I can help manage your money for you. I know you're having trouble now. Let's just go down to the friendly lawyer and make a power of attorney. Okay, planning ahead. We are encouraging people to do that, as I explained earlier. And this is a slide in there now about the Managing Someone Else's Money Guides, so that's great. And if you're a victim of fiduciary abuse, again, we're always reinforcing that message. Go to Adult Protective Services or your local law enforcement agency.
Okay.
And I think that's the end of this portion, so happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions for Naomi? You can either put them in the Q&A. I did see that Kendra posted a comment after the last segment about her perception of a severe lack of training in elder financial exploitation by law enforcement, court, protective services in some states. And yes, we do hear that as well. In terms of the POA abuse segment of Money Smart for older adults, you can actually take this, because you see it's quite brief. It gives you an opportunity to partner with legal service organizations or collaborate with legal service providers in your community who may want to contribute their expertise to come to the presentation. Are there any questions? Operator Robin, would you mind telling people how to come on with a question? We do have one in the room, but if you could announce to the group if people want to press star, whatever that is.
Absolutely. If you would like to ask a question over the phone, unmute your phone, press *1, and record your name clearly so I may introduce your question. Again, if you would like to ask a question, press *1.
Thank you, Robin. We do have one in the room. Were you able to hear that, Naomi?
No, could you repeat it?
Okay. So the question is, to develop a state-specific guide, does the CFPB provide support from a staff member to accomplish that?
Yes, we do. So,
I've got a great volunteer by the sounds of it.
Yeah. So basically, if you are interested in doing that, what I would suggest is the first thing to do is, obviously, after you've read all the materials, take a look at the tips publication. It's really brief. It's, I don't know, 10 pages or less. It's, as I said, it's 10 steps for how you could form a group of experts and how you could divide up the work and move forward, and then take a look at the templates. And I would say once you kind of have your game plan and you've pulled together some people and you start talking about it, what's happened in the other couple of states, in Texas and Michigan, once they kind of got their initiative going, got their core group of people going, or at least some of them, and started talking about it, then questions would pop up in their mind and they would reach out to me, and I can schedule a conference call, or I can have some email correspondence and answer some questions. If there are questions that have to do with copyright, or actually there is no copyright on our materials, they're in the public domain, so you can take them and just adapt them. The only thing you can't do is make it look like you're the CFPB putting them out, but you know, it's federal government stuff. It's out in the public domain. But I guess that was a long way of saying, yes, we will help you. We will not help you write, you know, your whole guide, but we're happy to answer questions and help walk you through it.
Are there any other questions, Robin?
There are no questions over the phone at this time, but as a reminder, if you would like to ask a question, press star followed by the number 1.
Okay. If there's a question, just go ahead and hit your phone tab there, and Robin, you can interrupt me if you think that if you see a question come in.
Will do.
Okay, thanks. All right. Thank you, Naomi.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah. Talk to you soon.
Yep.
Bye for now. Okay. This is Jennifer again. I'm back, and I'm going to walk you through some effective presentation tips. And again, I'm going to tailor this very much as if you are speaking to seniors, older people. However, you may not always be speaking to older people. You might be talking to a Rotary Club, or you might be talking to colleagues, or you might be invited to address a group of bankers or some other very important stakeholder. You may use MoneySmart to train law enforcement or even adult protective services folks sometimes, or you'll train other colleagues or other trainers. But anyway, one of the number one tips is to know your audience. And I kind of ran through, if you have a group of seniors, you're going to present in a certain way. And if you have a group of professionals, you may present in a certain way. And let's say you are speaking to a homeowners association in a senior living community. You may want to consider the content, you should consider the content, and perhaps look at the section, include the section on scams that target homeowners. So you really want to think about it. Now, one of the pieces of experience I can share with you is many times when I have been invited, and this is sort of in my past life before I got into the CFPB role, but was to get invited to, say, a senior housing complex of some sort, or an assisted living facility where people, they're independent, they're getting phone calls, they may have caregivers coming in or housekeepers, they still have exposures, risk of being scammed. So I would be invited to speak, and it was mostly for the residents, and a good question to ask is there anything in particular you'd like me to talk about? Sometimes they don't know to ask about a particular type of scam, but you'll often discover that there's been a little bit of a crime wave of some type in the facility. Sometimes not. Sometimes it's just general. So knowing your audience, tailoring it to the group. Is it a group of veterans or people that are likely to be veterans? Because we have content on that. Is it, perhaps if it's a Alzheimer's Association caregiver support group, you might want to talk about financial caregiving, powers of attorney, and the resources that are available. Understanding their expectations, if they have any, this can cover a broad range of possibilities, from the amount of time to whether they're, what they're looking for in a presentation. And making the information relevant to them. This is just really about tailoring the presentation to fit your audience. If it's a group of bankers, you might want to think about what you want them to do with it. Like, do you want them to take it and run with it, or are you using it just to train their staff to be more aware on the front line? Are you going to try to engage them as partners in your MDT or your FAST or your coalition, your network? So that can help you to sort of make the information more relevant. Speaking slowly and clearly and enunciating is extremely important when you're addressing older people, and putting in sort of pauses. I have found that if you rush through and you're talking down or you're looking at your notes and you're not making eye contact and you're not projecting your voice, it's just going to run right over people. And the good news is that older people will often say, "Excuse me, I didn't hear that," or "Could you say that again?" I mean, they'll often stop you. But just being very aware, it's one of the greatest compliments of my time in working with older people is to have them come up afterwards and say, "I really like the way you speak. I could hear everything. I could understand everything. You had perfect cadence, basically, in your delivery." So that's where practice comes in. Always using a microphone if there's a microphone available. In this room, depending on your voice, you might get away with not using a microphone, but I highly recommend that if you have a microphone, say, "Is this better with the microphone at your mouth? Is this better, or is this better? And or is this okay, or is this okay?" And they'll tell you. But don't assume that your voice is loud enough. Different rooms will eat sound. Make sure the doors are closed to noise away. You get people walking by making noise. As we did earlier, highly recommend you start your slides by asking a question and engage your audience. And it's okay if they don't answer. They're shy. You could give it, 10 seconds or 8 seconds, and somebody will speak up usually. And if they don't, then you can go, engage. But getting them to start talking is so important, to start answering the questions, because, again, you're getting them to raise their voice and start talking about elder abuse and financial exploitation and learning from each other and not just being spoon-fed by you. If you have local stories or real-life examples, newspaper clippings are really great to be able to hold it up and say, "This was in the paper a month ago, and it concerns an elder in, I'm going to say East Campus because that's where I am. I know there's probably not that many elders on East Campus, maybe a few. But anyway, this concerns an elder from this neighborhood, and this is what happened." And it brings it home for them. Like, wow, this actually happens here. And they may have read it in the paper. And they go, ding, ding, ding. That's elder financial exploitation. That's what we're learning about. And that's also what I really encourage you to, if you are not APS or law enforcement, is to invite APS or law enforcement to be at your presentation. If they don't do a significant segment, they can at least come and introduce themselves and say, "I'm here to help you. I'm here to assure you that our work in APS is to keep you safe and independent at home for as long as possible. We have no desire to put you in a nursing home. We only have a desire to help you solve your issues." And seniors just love to hear that, and they love to see your friendly face in front of them, that you're a real person. You're not somebody in a white coat from the county who's got a straitjacket who's going to haul them off, which sadly is sometimes the perception. And that perception may have been put into their head by somebody who's using it. So it's really, really great. I've just always loved it when APS or law enforcement can come out and talk to seniors, talk to older people, and let them know that they're there to help, and talk about, reassure people. Always complimenting your participants on interesting or insightful comments. That can be as simple as smiling and nodding. That can be as simple as "good answer, thank you for that. That's the #1 answer." Just sort of engaging with them and reassuring them, because that helps them encourage them to continue speaking up. And then, as we've been doing today by virtue of necessity because of the sound system, is repeating every question in the room. And I suggest you do that, especially if your question is coming from the front row. I am 99% sure that the people in the back row, if the rows are 7 or 8 back, are not going to be able to hear because the voice is coming this way. So repeating the question is good, and it's also to repeat the question if it came to you in a sort of disjointed or confusing manner. Sometimes people stumble, they get a little nervous when their voice is up and everybody turns to look at them. They may stumble around a bit. So reconstituting the question. So you're asking about a situation where this has taken place and the concern is about this and you want to know where to get help. You just sort of package it all up, confirm that the questioner, I did that with you just a minute ago, like, did I get that right when I repeated it back to make sure you got it right? And that is just really helpful, and everybody can hear. And then, okay, let's see. There's a little bit more about questions. Your role as an instructor is just to convey the course information effectively and clearly, and obviously to raise awareness of financial exploitation. But most of all, it's to inspire and empower your audience to protect themselves and to raise their voices and report. And you are hopefully facilitating a safe environment for discussion. However, there are some caveats around that, and I think that you have to be a little bit careful that people might tell a story that could go on for 15 or 20 minutes, and they can hijack your discussion. So you have to sort of figure out how to gently sort of put a stop to people who ramble on. Discussion is good. It's optimum, but it does have to be sort of managed, especially if you're on a tight time frame. And also, if that discussion starts to talk about personal details of an individual, like, I live over on this street, and my next-door neighbor, Minnie Harrelson, has a son, and you're like, whoa, hold on. You have to say, thank you for bringing that up, and that sounds like you need to make a report or you need to talk to somebody privately. Come see me afterwards, and I'll help you get some support for your neighbor. And, cut them off if they start to reveal personal details. You might actually practice that to just come up with a great way to say, oh, thank you for bringing that up, and just stop them. Because you don't want confidentiality violated or people embarrassed or exposed. It doesn't happen often, but it can happen, and it has happened. And it's great that they're raising their voice, but not that much. Okay. We have a resource. I'm going to talk about resources now, and then we'll go back to Kay, who will talk about some great resources. These are resources for you if you're not already engaged with a network. We did a presentation on networks yesterday. We have a guide that will help you if you want to start a network in an area, in a region, or a county, or a city. It talks about funding and sustainability if that's something you need to consider. The value and the traits of a successful network coordinator, and especially if that's you and you're starting a regional network and you want to know, like, how do I make sure this works? Because it is actually difficult. People don't need another meeting to go to. So making those meetings really valuable and being a dynamic leader of a coalition, task force, MDT, FAST, whatever you want to call it, the coordinator is so tremendously important. And then how to organize effective meetings, and then discussion about the different types of activities, like, for example, education, like community outreach, doing Money Smart for older adults or some other outreach program, and also the case review potential. Some networks actually serve APS and law enforcement and legal services and other stakeholders by intaking cases that are obviously very complicated, but using each other's expertise to solve those cases or to know where to go for information. For example, APS may bring a case and there's a banker in the group, and APS says, I'm having problems getting records from the bank. What do I do? And the banker will say, well, we have the following restrictions, but I would suggest that you collaborate with law enforcement. Law enforcement might open a case. If they open a case and certify that a case is open, then I can reveal the records to law enforcement. And so, helping them to get through it to hopefully with the intention and the result of case resolution. So that's our network guide. We also have a study that we did on 23 networks across the country that represents a cross-section of 890-plus networks that we identified. So there's a study, and it has lots, I also want to say it has lots of citations. It was done by the study was headed up by the Library of Congress's Federal Research Division. And so there's a literature review in it with a lot of references, a lot of citations. So if you're writing grants or you're needing information to sort of attach, it's a good one-stop shop to get information about community initiatives. So that's our resource guide. We have a lot of resources. You can get them at the CFPB. You can order by just going directly to our website, consumerfinance.gov/older-American. Or you can just go to consumerfinance.gov, and right on the front page it'll say our education and resources, and then you can click on that, and then it'll take you, it'll say resources for older Americans. You click on that, you'll be on the same page. Also from our homepage, you can find Ask CFPB, which is a great resource for all of us, people of all ages. It's over 1,000 questions about financial matters, ranging from what is a mortgage servicer, what is a prepaid debit card, what is a reverse mortgage, how do I what do I need to know about financial advisor, financial exploitation, and it uses tag names. So you could go with auto loan, money transfer issues. So it's for all of us. It's not just for older people, but if you want to get to questions that are just for older people, you can hit senior, older adult, elder financial exploitation, reverse mortgage, Social Security, whatever, and it'll take you directly, so you don't have to scroll through 900 plus, 1,000 plus questions. Actually get there quickly. And all of those questions are being retooled a little bit right now, sort of streamlined, but all of those questions refer to resources. So if, for example, if you have an elder out there who's having issues with debt collection, like aggressive medical debt collectors or debt collection scams, which is a really huge issue for older people, you can go to Ask CFPB, hit debt collection, and you'll find sample letters on there that you can help your elder client to submit to the debt collector that says, please describe what this debt is, and it has all the right questions to ask, and it's basically pushing back against aggressive debt collectors and getting the information they need in order to know whether it's actually a real debt, whether they really owe it, or what they need to be saying to the creditor, because it's just so hard when these folks call and hammer you for a debt, especially if you don't owe it. And elders are particularly vulnerable often to debt collectors because they are proud folks who want to pay their bills, and just because they're told they owe money doesn't mean they do or they should have to. Okay, that's just one example of many. We also take complaints on consumer products and services. We do not take reports of elder financial exploitation, although occasionally our consumer response team will get a call. We do take telephone calls, or there's a number at the bottom, or they'll get a complaint that needs to be referred, say, to the FTC because it's some sort of it's a fraud that's under their jurisdiction, or they know to refer to Adult Protective Services. They know about the Elder Care Locator, and so we do refer out when we receive calls about older persons where we suspect there may be a financial exploitation or some other elder abuse issue. But submitting complaints, I'm not going to get into a big description of how it works. You can go on the website and find out. But you can file on behalf of an older person or a client. But what we do is we take the complaints and we will assist the consumer with contacting the company, and we'll ask the company to resolve the problem. It may be that the consumer has made a mistake, or that just because there's a complaint doesn't mean the financial institution's done anything wrong. But when they get a letter from us, it usually sort of pops their eyes open, and they'll have a look, and they'll do their best to resolve it. And sometimes there are mistakes, and people are just getting lost in these, put on hold and getting bounced around. And by submitting a complaint with us, sometimes we can help cut to the chase and get to the bottom of what's happening and get it resolved. So just keep in mind that that's a good resource. And you should go on and look at what products and services we cover. I want to mention student loans is one of them, the student lending industry. And a lot of older people are subject to issues now with student lending because they're retiring with student loans that are very difficult, and it's compromising their financial well-being, or they have co-signed loans for grandkids or others, and they're now stuck with the bill, and it's causing them problems. Not saying that we can fix that necessarily, but there's information, and if there are unfair, deceptive, or abusive practices, we collect these complaints, we analyze them, and if there are trends out there, then our supervision or exam team might have a look to see if something needs to be corrected in the industry. Okay. Kay, are you handy?
I am.
Great. So I'm going to turn this over to Kay. She's going to go through some of the older adult-specific resources that the FDIC has. They actually have an impressive array, and then we'll come back for questions. We should be, I would imagine, we'll be, depending on how many questions, we should be out of here in 20 or 30 minutes. Okay.
All right. Thank you, Jennifer. As Jennifer said, we do have an array of resources on our website. And I'm just going to, we show you a website a little bit later, but I want to just hit the basic, which is FDIC.gov. And when you go onto that website, you're going to see several different areas and a lot of information. The one on the screen now, the FDIC Consumer News articles, those are updated regularly. There are all types of articles within that particular header. And when you go on the site, you simply, just in the middle of the page, it will say FDIC.gov what's new, and you'll have a consumer news click that you can click on. And as you can see, it has the how can older adults steer clear of scam artists? What do you do before you retire? Getting ready for those golden years. There's wonderful information on there. Now, I'm going to add just a couple more that you don't see there, and I don't have on the slides, but I think are very helpful for general public as well as seniors. Sometimes when you're looking for a bank that perhaps you want to collaborate this training with, we have a bank find. So when you go onto our website, you click under bank data and you will see bank find, and simply put the name of your community and your state, and it will pull up all banks in your area, so that then you have several to choose from that you could perhaps partner with in order to do this training. Our bankers love this training, so they will be excited that you have contacted them to begin with. So don't forget just the bank data find as well. And then, of course, as the slide suggests, it has estate planning and banking. It has tips for seniors wanting to help relatives. There's just a plethora of articles on this particular website. Go ahead, next slide. Now, also, when we're talking about Money Smart for older adults, we have several other Money Smart curriculum, but your seniors are often interested in learning about basic banking or basic savings checking. So the one that's on the screen now is simply Money Smart, which was our first product. That particular product comes in 9 different languages. It also comes in Braille. And as you can see through the modules, like all of our Money Smart products, depending on the clientele that you're working with, if they just want to know about credit, how to read a credit report, or simply some borrowing basics, depending, of course, on your audience, pick out just 1 or 2 of the modules and have that for them to look at, or just explain about Money Smart and walk through the modules yourself so that you know what they're basically interested in. But again, any of the Money Smart products can be downloaded directly from the FDIC.gov website. And so this is an area that you might want to show the seniors, as well as they may want to also learn about just financial planning or financial management along with the Money Smart for older adults. Okay, next slide, please. And then, of course, back to the FDIC website, we've got a Money Smart newsletter, which, again, if you just in the search title on the FDIC.gov web page put in Money Smart, you will pull up a newsletter. You'll pull up the Money Smart Alliance so that you know who else is actually training Money Smart. And there may be organizations that are identified there that are in your area that you can also collaborate with. And then it has, of course, the FDIC consumer news and research publications, which are great to pull up. So helpful, a lot of data. All right, next slide, thank you. And now this is showing you what the FDIC consumer news looks like. And as it says, it offers practical guidance on becoming a smarter, safer user of financial services. This particular pamphlet has a lot, or publication has a lot of information in, and you can see the website, which is very easy to get to, and it's always changing, always good, new information. Okay, let's see, next slide. And then we also have, as CFPB, an Ask FDIC phone number that can direct you to anywhere you want to go. They will also listen to, there may be complaints, they may direct you elsewhere. We work in collaboration with CFPB if a complaint comes in to ensure that whoever is the appropriate authority is getting that complaint and is addressing it properly. And then, of course, there's the mymoney.gov website, which also has a lot of resources. It's kind of fun just to go to the website to play around because I think you're going to be amazed at what all you can find on the website. And it's very simple to walk through, very user-friendly. Next slide.
Okay.
There you go. Cheers, Jennifer.
All right. If any of you have questions, operator, do you want to initiate the question line again just so people can start asking questions, because we'll be done here in just a couple of minutes and it'll be Q&A time. I do see a question on the line. I will answer that in a second. Thank you, Debbie. And I see that Kendra put up a resource from the October 2014 Maine Legislative Commission report on Elder Protective Services, and it talks about training in the state of Maine. Okay, so again, consumerfinance.gov/older-Americans. Some of the resources we have are a mailing list where you can sign up, and you will get the occasional blog posting that we do. Usually they announce a product release of some sort, like a snapshot. Recently we did a snapshot on older adults and student loans, for example. We issue little policy briefings. We issue new products, like when Money Smart was released. Lots of resources. We don't share the names or the contacts with anyone. It's very tightly guarded. And we don't overwhelm you with emails either. You probably get one a month at the most. We just did one for World Elder Abuse Awareness Day that has links in it to a lot of different resources that might be of interest to you. You can order all of these materials in bulk, all of our resources, the SEC, CFPB diminished capacity handout. You can order the Money Smart for Older Adult resource guide. Do we have the guides here? Actually, all I see here are the instructor guides. I don't see the resource guide. Oh, you didn't open the other box. Okay. Well, the good news is you can get them online and you can order them. Everybody else has to do that here. But you can order up to like 200 at a time, I believe, in a box. But there's no limit on the number of boxes, so you don't have to scramble around to get 10 people to order boxes for you. You can just do as many as you need. So keeping in mind, you may not be teaching a class, but you may want them for a senior information fair. You may want to hand them out around libraries. You may want to give them to colleagues. But they're generally intended to be handouts for presentations. You can order one at a time. You can download it as a PDF and make an attachment on your website with any of our materials. If your organization or agency has a website, you can go to us and you can link to all of our resources or just to our OA page. And if you have questions about that, you can just come back and talk to me, and I'll get you in touch with our outreach coordinator who can help you. But ordering these materials in bulk, they're free of charge, and that includes shipping. Please keep in mind that being the government, we can be a little bit slow at getting things out. So plan, if you have an event that you're planning for, plan 4 to 6 weeks in advance. It generally takes 2 to 3 minimum to get the materials, but we go for 6 if you can, and 4 will usually do it. We do sometimes get back orders, but we're trying to avoid that at this point. And so that goes also for the Managing Someone Else's Money Guides. It goes for the Considering a Reverse Mortgage handout. All of our materials are available in bulk. And we have an ordering site, so you can actually just go through a tick, 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 and it'll get sent out. Okay, what else? Questions from anyone?
And for those on the phone line, it is star followed by the number 1, and I'll mute your line to record your name clearly so I'll be able to introduce you. Again, for questions from the phone line, it will be star followed by the number 1.
And there is a question, thank you, Robin. There is a question on the line. Will the resources be able to be emailed to participants after the webinar? Well, I'm going to ask you a question. We had a little flurry of emails that came out of the WebEx system to remind you all of the webinar, and there were some issues with the timing because of the time zones for some reason. But I did try to attach the instructor guide, the resource guide to those emails, and I'm wondering if you received them. If anybody has an answer to that, if you could post it, that would be great. But regardless, I now have a list of all of you who registered, all 115 or 20 of you, and so I will send a reply out, and I won't do it through the WebEx system. I'll just do it independently by BCC, and I will send you all of these materials. I won't send you everything we have because I don't want them to get bounced out of your system. I will send you the instructor guide, and I will send you the resource guide, and then and I'll also send you this PowerPoint and Naomi's PowerPoint. And I'll do that in the next couple days. Please give me till like close of business Friday or Monday noon, somewhere in there. Let me fly home first to deal with it.
Jennifer, could I make a comment? This is Kay.
Yes, Kay.
If any of the participants are ordering individual downloading through the FDIC website, that is immediate, and you can get all of these just by going to the FDIC.gov and then typing in MoneySmart in the search bar, and you can download immediately.
Right, and it is the only way to get the PowerPoint presentation. And something I did say about MoneySmart for older adults that I think needs to be said is that it is a massive amount of content. It's something like 300 minutes of content. So please don't go out and try to sit seniors down and do an all-day, stem to stern, top to bottom presentation. Definitely look at the program planning guide in the front and the time frames that are put in there. You have, 20 minutes for the overview, and then maybe you want to focus on POA, which is another, and then you do 15 minutes of Q&A and discussion. Mix it up, break it up. You can actually create a series that you could take out to a senior center or a senior housing facility and say, hey, we'll do every Saturday morning from 10:30 to noon, and here's what we'll cover. And realize that, if you're dealing with a super, super low-income group, like we have a group of attorneys with the American Bar Association who are pro bono, they're a pro bono subcommittee of a section of the bar, and they wanted to get into some very low-income neighborhoods and do some scam prevention. And one thing they didn't do was talk about choosing, being a safe investor, because the people that they're dealing with are not generally going to be investing money. It's all they can do to get through their month. So just being cognizant, again, of your audience and not expecting that, knowing who they are and what might be most important to them. Yeah, so you can divide it up. It's very malleable. You pull out the slides you want. You can actually co-brand it if you like, but please don't change the slides around. Don't change the words on the slides and then co-brand it. We prefer that, it's clear content. If it gets editorial or anything, you really should take our branding off. You're welcome to do what you like, but if you change it substantively, please remove our branding. Any questions?
On the phone line, I'm seeing no questions.
Anyone in the room? Going once, going twice. Thank you all very, very much for your participation. I don't think I might have my name. No, I don't. I am Jennifer, Jennefer, .Duane, D-U-A-N-E. That's Jennifer, Jennefer, .Duane, at CF, as in Frank, or as in financial, PB, as in boy, .gov. Jennifer.Duane at CFPB.gov. Please contact me if you have any questions or follow-ups or you have any issues with accessing any of this. And let me know also if you have any really good success stories. We occasionally run a nice story in the FDIC Money Smart Alliance newsletter, and we love to share innovations. We've got folks out there doing really, really great things. Actually, Kay, we had a group there where you are in Minnesota who broke up Money Smart for older adults into 4 segments and put it on public television. And that has run for months and months and months and been very successful in that community. There are groups doing all kinds of different things with Money Smart, so we encourage you to make it work for you and report back to us if you have any exciting news. We'd love to highlight or shine lights on your great work. And we do have a question in the room now. The link to the recording. Yes. I have to jump through a few hoops to download it. I will try to do that this week. It's not hard to do, but yeah, we'll actually, Robin, could you make a note just to make sure it's posted on the on your website and then send me a link? That'll make it easier than me trying to download it and send it a separate file.
Yes, they do send the link to that.
Excellent. So yes, we'll have a link and we'll send it out. Thank you for that. So with that, I'll say thanks so much, and thank you so much for all the great work you do to protect older people from financial exploitation and other problems. Have a great day.
And thank you. This does conclude the audio portion of today's conference call. You may disconnect your lines, and thank you for your participation.